So Meghan, it's great to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, you too.
You came to Kelowna 10 years ago.
Yes, I had gone to high school in Penticton, so I had roots in the Okanagan prior to living in Kelowna. But when I was finishing up BCIT, I was actually contemplating staying and living in Vancouver, simply for business reasons. And then my heart ended up winning that negotiation, and I decided to move to Kelowna for lifestyle reasons.
So you're from Whistler, and you went to high school in Penticton, so you must have been to Kelowna several times.
Yeah, my childhood roots were in Whistler, high school in Penticton, and yes, of course, living in Penticton, I had become familiar with Kelowna. However, back at that time, Kelowna wasn't anywhere near what it is today.
Yeah. Tell us about some of the changes you've seen since then.
In particular, just right off the top of my head, when I'd come up to Kelowna, I mean, West Kelowna certainly grew up overnight. I remember when I was in high school, you'd drive through West Kelowna and it was basically just fields on either side of the highway. So that was a dramatic change. And yeah, it's just really grown up.
Your name is all over the place with commercial real estate in Kelowna. What did you take at BCIT, and does it relate to real estate?
Very much so. I took a commercial real estate marketing program, so pretty much exactly what I'm doing now.
Was that something you wanted to do since you were very young?
Actually, I was originally going to take the professional sales program, and then I spent quite a bit of time with my dad analyzing that program, and we went to a seminar in Vancouver at the campus, and throughout that process, my dad actually encouraged me to take the real estate program. So that's what I did. And then he set up a meeting for me to meet with someone and ask them some questions about the program. I really didn't know who I was meeting at that point in time. Drove to Squamish, spent 45 minutes chatting with this fellow, and at the end of that meeting found out he was the head of the program, and he accepted me at that point in time. So felt like a little bit of fate.
Yeah. So your dad must have a background in real estate.
Yeah, he is a general contractor in Whistler.
Interesting. So it's something you've kind of always been interested in. And did you have a decision to make between residential and commercial real estate?
Oh, I thought about that for about 5 minutes, and then I realized I would make a much better commercial real estate agent.
Why do you think that is?
Commercial real estate negotiations are, I would say, typically more pragmatic, a little bit less emotional, and knowing my own skill set, I could see myself excelling in that style of real estate over residential.
Yeah.
And admittedly, I was attracted to the fact that commercial is more banking hours. Not that I'm always happy to make myself available to clients on the weekend or in the evenings, but it's just not quite as commonplace in commercial.
Yeah, it's definitely very different. Having done both, and there's a lot of emotion in residential
as
real
we
estate.
know when I bought my house with you.
Yeah, it's a huge thing, and it's your life. That's where you're spending at least a third of your life sleeping, at least, right? And probably a lot more time than that. So there's a lot of factors that are really important, and I guess with commercial it's more about the the numbers are the top thing, but also the condition of the building, and it's much more like you said, pragmatic.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into a commercial real estate lease negotiation, and what those things are depends on whether it's office, industrial, or retail. So there's certainly a lengthy checklist for any style of lease that you want to make sure you're highly diligent on. So it's more than numbers, like you say. Oftentimes the biggest part of the negotiation is the condition of the space and who's going to pay for what. But yeah, it's just a little less personal.
Yeah. I don't believe there's a lot of women in commercial real estate. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm almost positive there's very few young women. You started very young. Can you tell us about your experience a little bit? When I remember when I was young and getting into real estate, I did get a little bit of pushback from older people, just with the attitude of like, I don't have a lot of experience and so on. What's it like being in commercial real estate as a female?
So I recognize that there are less females in commercial real estate than men. I mean, it's quote unquote a man's world, a quote male dominated industry. However, I really haven't spent that much time focusing on that. And in the few, I can count on one hand how many times I feel like that's really been an issue. And when those situations arise, I just move right along.
Was it easy from the start for you? Or was it a little bit of...
No, it wasn't easy. I had a lot of great support, though. I started my career in the Collier's office among some of the top commercial real estate brokers in the interior, and I think I attribute my ability to carve my way into the business because I said yes to a whole bunch of little assignments. Nothing was too small, and so anytime somebody had a referral, I treated it like it was the biggest deal in the world, because at that point to me it was.
That's awesome. And then I'm sure a lot of those clients came back to you with larger deals, and they had confidence in you.
Yeah, relationships were established and nurtured, and I do believe that clients appreciated my grit and attention to detail on some of the smaller deals. To be honest, I still do. I still do some of those smaller deals, and they are based on relationships. I love helping people. I sincerely love helping people in my field.
You have done some huge deals as well, some very large deals. Was it difficult to get to that level, to gain the confidence of people?
I gave it a healthy amount of time before I put myself in the line of fire on some of those bigger deals. I have been in the business now for 10 years, and I do feel like, now looking at a smaller deal relative to a huge deal, as you say, the metrics aren't really that different.
Right.
So it was, like you say, highly based on generating the confidence to feel like I could be in that space. And it's tough to say exactly how long it took, but I'm there now.
Right. What would you say was your biggest surprise in your career 10 years from now? I mean, 10 years in so far. When we're young and we get into a new career, we have certain expectations of how things are going to go. Was it exactly like that, or did you have some surprises?
I don't think I've ever been asked that question before, but I think my biggest surprise was it wasn't as hard as I really thought it was going to be. I know I just laughed and said it wasn't easy, but you have the grit, you continue to show up, you work on the little things, you don't get ahead of yourself, and all of a sudden it's just happening.
Yeah. A lot of mathematics involved.
Yeah, definitely. It's a numbers game for sure. You have to be comfortable with your numbers.
Yeah. Well, could you tell us, if you see young people come in or inexperienced people come into the business, what are some of the mistakes that you see people make when they're new?
I think the biggest mistake I see for those just getting into the business is a lack of patience. So you really have to be prepared to put in your time. You can't expect everything to happen all at once. Certainly, I've seen people get a little bit ahead of themselves and perhaps thinking that they don't need to work on the smaller deals. And in my opinion, I guess too, being so young when I started, it maybe would have been different if I was older. But yeah, just putting in your time.
Yeah. And would you say that commercial deals generally take longer?
Yes.
On average than sometimes you get a lease and it happens quickly, but most of the time a bigger commercial deal takes a longer time.
I just closed a deal that took 1.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And maybe walk us through, without giving away anything confidential, of course, but maybe walk us through what happens over 1.5 years. Why does it take that long?
Well, in that particular case, there was a change in ownership. The tenant with whom we were dealing with was purchased by another group.
Okay.
So there were legalities and delays that happened due to that.
So was it a long-term lease with a build-out and that sort of thing?
Yes, it was a long-term lease. It was, from both the landlord and the tenant's perspective, what I would call a higher risk deal. And like I say, with that change of ownership and lawyers get involved, and the lease would go out and it would take a month to get comments back, that sort of thing. So relative to residential, now with the new agency rules, we are working more with residential agents. And one of the conversations I do have off the bat is just asking for a little bit of grace on timelines.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
And a lot of times too, these landlords and tenants, they're massive corporations. So approvals have to go through 3, 4, 5 levels of executive committee approval, and you just really do have to be patient.
How do you, because I think this applies to residential real estate too. I always try to be assertive, move the ball forward, but I never want to come across as the pushy salesman that's, annoying, pestering people. How do you find that balance of like when it's time to follow up, be assertive, move that ball forward without being too much of a pest? Is it just instinct and experience?
Yeah, I would say it's instinct. I mean, sometimes you just know that there are factors happening outside of your control and there's truly nothing that you can do to expedite. However, anytime I see an opportunity to help move things along at a quicker pace, I'll always take that opportunity. But of course, like you say, I mean, you never want to be a pushy salesperson. You never want people to think that your actions are more self-serving than they are serving the deal. Right.
Do you ever get frustrated with lawyers?
Yes.
All the time.
Yes.
Yeah. When I've done commercial real estate in the past, I mean, a lot of times I felt like we had a deal done.
Right.
But a lawyer wanted to insert a clause. And, it was sometimes a challenge for me to just, keep cool about it.
Yeah. I mean, it really comes down to the function of the deal at hand. For example, if you've got a deal with a high level of risk and a tenant's getting a huge allowance from a landlord and the tenant has formed a new shell corporation to act on that lease, and the landlord and the tenant have negotiated over a matter of months that there's going to be an additional indemnity or guarantee, and then it hits the lawyer's desk and they try and say that that's unreasonable, then I guess the biggest frustration comes in when you know that there's been a lot of discussion going into fundamental terms, and then, yeah.
And in my opinion, some lawyers are definitely easier to deal with than others.
Yes.
I find, not to throw anybody under the bus, but I find sometimes it almost feels like they're trying to generate work.
Right.
Instead of just, smooth things along, make sure everybody's protected and get the deal done so we can get to the next deal. But, I think it's a lot of personality comes into that too.
For sure. And I, local lawyers here in Kelowna, for the most part, have been nothing but great experiences. Some of the most frustrating experiences have been where the lawyer's far removed. So sitting in an office in Toronto, or even worse, in the States, which I've had a couple times with the big corporate tenants, and you just have a massive disconnect. Yeah.
You mentioned high-risk deal, and you said from the landlord's perspective, if it's a new corporation, it's a shell, and the landlord's giving a lot of incentives, and maybe contributing to the build-out, what would be an example of a high-risk deal from the tenant's perspective?
Well, tenants are typically going to have skin in the game. Risk really, I would say, always seems to come back to the cost of improvements. So if you're a tenant and you're spending $120 a square foot to build the space out and the landlord's only giving you $20, you're extremely married to that deal. And in a situation like that, it is becoming more and more common that a landlord would require a personal guarantee. So if you're a tenant that's not only married financially to the deal, but you're personally married to the deal, then you expose your assets, your personal assets.
For sure. Can you think of a deal that you've worked on in the past that was particularly challenging and that you feel very satisfied because you got it done?
Yeah, there was a deal recently at the Innovation Center, which was the last deal that we did to bring that building to 100% completion. It was 22,000 square feet, and the tenant was Regis. they're opening a concept called Spaces, which is a really funky new age co-working concept.
Is it similar to what they have at Landmark?
Yep.
Or similar to that.
Similar to that, or the Regis at Landmark is more geared to your traditional professional, whereas the one downtown will be a little bit more culturally driven and socially driven, and be a really great support for tech. But Regis is either the second or the third office occupier in the world. So being that big, that's one of those situations where it needs to go through so many levels of approvals. And there were certainly times where it was uncertain as to whether or not it was going to push through. And we all really wanted to see it happen because we knew it was the right deal for the building and for the community, for the tech community and downtown Kelowna, generally speaking. So that is when and it was so many more people than just me. There was a fellow named Kelsey Helm who I worked very closely with. He worked for the landlord, and without him, that deal wouldn't have gotten done.
I'm always curious about the differences between residential and commercial. Some of the differences are obvious, but for example, like when I'm trying to sell a house and the activity hasn't been super brisk, and it's taking a bit of a time, and then we've got someone interested, but there's someone else who might be interested. And to me, it's always a bit of a balancing act. Like, I want to create this sense of urgency and get a deal on paper, but I don't want to be so aggressive that somebody says, well, I'm not getting into a bidding war.
Right.
So when you have deals that take like months, sometimes up to a year or more, what do you do if someone comes along in the interim and says, you know what, I'm interested in this space? Do you take backup offers? Do you try to negotiate two deals simultaneously? Like, what do you do in that case?
Yeah, I would never really try to negotiate two deals simultaneously, because I think that's a good way to get everybody
pissed off.
Yeah. I would say the answer to that question is so case by case. So it's difficult to answer generally speaking. But typically, I find most landlords I work with like to deal more exclusively with one tenant. And, if a deal's gone on for that long, chances are that it's either quite unique in the sense where it's not that there would be a long list of tenants who could maybe make that space work, or there's commitment on both sides of the deal for certain reasons. And there's been a high level of investment too, whether that's legal or construction analysis. It could be a list of things, but
certainly time. People invest a lot of time.
Yeah. I would say too, generally speaking, on the leasing side of things, like the investment side of the business is a little bit different. So leasing, usually you have the luxury of time and options if you're a tenant. But if you're a buyer in the investment world, typically there are more buyers than sellers. So buyers don't really have that luxury. Like if we have an investment listing and we have a buyer that gets it under contract, if they're not able to keep the pace up, chances are very high in that scenario that they'll lose the deal.
On a, let's say, hypothetical $10 million building purchase, how long does a buyer get to do due diligence?
On an existing building, it depends on the building. I mean, sometimes there's a thorough environmental process that needs to take place.
Especially older buildings.
Yeah, or if say it's an industrial building and there's concerns as it relates to environmental, and on a $10 million purchase, financing is going to be a key factor in that. So it's again tough to say, but I can tell you that things have relaxed a little bit over the last year. When we were in that peak, really frothy market, there was a lot of pressure on buyers to complete their due diligence in a sometimes unrealistically short time period. So as I was saying to you before we jumped on the podcast, it's kind of nice that things have balanced out a little bit more. So everyone has time to complete the proper due diligence.
Yeah, right. So how long does a commercial bank typically take? Like if you've got all the financial statements, and it's pretty straightforward, like it might be a lot of dollars, but you've got, I don't know, say 10 tenants, they've all got leases, you get an appraisal on the building. Banks should be able to turn that around fairly quickly, right?
Yeah, that shouldn't be.
Is it like weeks or months, or?
I would say typically it can happen in weeks once they have all the information that they need.
Yeah.
I mean, if they need a phase 2 environmental, that might slow things down by a few weeks, but typically it shouldn't go on for months.
Yeah. Is it similar to residential in the sense that, like, I work with various mortgage brokers, and some of them say, "Oh, I need 3 weeks." And I've got a few that say, listen, if it's really a rush, like especially in 2016, we're having multiple offers. I have some mortgage brokers that will turn things around in 72, 96 hours for me. Are banks similar? Like, do you have people that are a little bit easier to work with on a quick basis, or are they all pretty much the same?
Most of our clients have established relationships with their financial institutions. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of them, they have a large portfolio of commercial assets. So, yeah, they've got 1 or 2 banks that they go to, and then they can leverage existing properties or assets. I mean, there are so many different scenarios, but yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to change anything in your career?
The biggest thing that I'm excited about at this point is having the opportunity to work with new people who are wanting to get into brokerage and expanding the team over time. And nice. I would like to, as much as I really do love working on the smaller deals, is just, natural evolution at this point in my career is to get more comfortable handing those off.
Right.
And, still being there to support them, but allowing, myself 10 years ago, those sorts of personalities to take that role.
Yeah. So there's lots you can teach for sure.
Yeah. Yes. I'm excited about the opportunity to mentor for sure.
Yeah. Do you prefer sales or leases, or do you like them both the same?
I like them both. Back to not wanting to force the steps of my career. Certainly leasing has been my bread and butter, and I'll do somewhere between 40 and 60 lease deals a year. No. Over the last few years, I've definitely been doing, a handful of sales within a year. And the sales can be extremely gratifying. They are typically higher volume deals, like larger purchase prices, just with the nature of commercial, and they're a lot of fun to work on. There is it is a little bit more of an aggressive space. So the leasing is, as much as I say it's still pragmatic, it is a little more personal, and I do enjoy that side of things.
Nice. And how's the market right now?
The market is great. We, on the investment side of things, I guess I should be careful in how I phrase that. The market is still strong on the investment side of things. So we still find that there are more buyers than sellers. It's not quite as panicked, as rushed as it was a year or so ago, and we do appreciate that balance. In the industrial lease space, the market is incredibly strong. We've got a very low vacancy rate, under 2%. So that particular asset class is, I've said it before, is the rock star.
Right.
Retail is getting more challenging. Retail is being disrupted by technology and e-commerce, so the Amazon effect. That being said, there's always going to be a place for bricks and mortar, but the tenants are just a little more sparse. There's a lot of demand on behalf of restaurants, but not as much boutique or big box retail. And then office is pretty strong locally in Kelowna as well. We had a lot of absorption over the last year, including Landmark and the Innovation Center, and a lot of that is being driven by the booming tech industry and a lot of professional services that go along to support it.
Yeah. I don't spend a lot of time inside office buildings, but my perception is I don't see a lot of vacant stores. There doesn't seem to be a lot of vacant retail. Is that accurate?
Yeah, our vacancy rate is sitting around between 6 and 7% right now. So
that's higher than I thought. But I guess because I'm going to the same plazas all the time, and they're full.
Right.
So, but there are like strip malls and things that have.
Yeah, there are certainly vacancies scattered about the city, and they're one of my big focuses is I've been working on quite a few of the mixed-use developments with the high-end retail on the ground floor. And, in those sorts of situations, you don't rush and do the first deal. You find the right deal, and the ground level of these new mixed-use developments, which are such a trend in Kelowna, really is sort of the showpiece of the project.
Yeah.
So
you got to have the right tenants.
Yeah, you have to have the right mix.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when I had the opportunity to be part of a podcast called I Love Kelowna, I felt it was pretty fitting because I love Kelowna so much.
Yeah.
My boyfriend teases me and calls me a Kelowna spokesperson. But, we chatted more about work and career than personal. But one of the things that I really enjoy lately is how it's all sort of feeling like, one, I'm creating great friendships and relationships with my clients, and so passionate about the vibrancy downtown and being a part of it, not just as a real estate professional, but just as a 33-year-old girl who is loving life and having fun, and I'm super passionate about that.
It's such a great city that we get to live in, and you're totally right. Whether it's commercial, residential, real estate is all about relationships and building confidence and trust. And you are certainly one of the best in the city, at least probably in the country, at what you do.
Thank you.
Just reading reviews and my own experience dealing with you, totally professional. You know what you're talking about, and very easy to talk to. So you've got all those great qualities. So thanks again, Meghan. Who would you like to nominate? Who would you like to hear me interview in the future?
One of my girlfriends is up to some pretty cool things, and I think she would make for an interesting interview, and her name is Leanne Hollowatch. And she has, over the past couple of years, started a business called Ink and Arch. She's just opened up a new storefront on Ellis Street, right across from B&A in the Cannery Lofts building. And the core business is microblading eyebrows, which is a big trend right now. But she's actually created an academy where she teaches other people to do that, and she's the definition of a boss. And awesome. She's a really great girl. She's got a lot of personality.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
And thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Luke Mankus is a realtor. He loves what he does. We asked Luke if he had any regrets about moving here in 2011, and he always says, yeah, one regret, and that is he didn't move here sooner. When Luke came here, he didn't know anyone. He didn't know the neighborhoods or anything or anyone besides his daughter, who was 6 years old at the time. So he knows what it's like. Now, he's an expert and has helped well over 100 single people, couples, families, and investors with their real estate needs in the Okanagan. If you're new to our beautiful city, Luke can help you get connected with great lawyers, dentists, carpenters, landscapers, swimming pool installers, you name it. And whether you're new to Kelowna or not, Luke knows real estate. He can help you find a great property, negotiate a good deal, and hold your hand all the way through the process until the day you get your shiny new set of keys. Luke is known as a no-pressure kind of guy. He's had clients where it took even a year or more to get them into a property. He just doesn't believe in rushing things. On the other hand, when you decide it's time to act, he's diligent and he'll work day and night until the job is done. Give Luke Mankus a call or a text message at any time, 778-215-4273. Again, that's 778-215-4273. 778-215-4273 to chat with Luke about real estate.